So, welcome. We're studying the book of Isaiah. We are in Isaiah chapter 14 this session. We will be going from verse 13 to verse 23. But before we get started, let's pray. Father, thank you for this time in your word. We just ask that you would speak to us as we study the word that you have for us in Isaiah. Thank you, Lord. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Again, we're in Isaiah chapter 13, or chapter 14 rather, starting in verse 13. Got it reversed. And what I need to let you all know about before we get started is this is a study that will be hazardous to your worldview. The reason why I say this could be hazardous to your worldview is for many believers, they do not have the same worldview that the Bible has. They think they do, but because we don't do a good job of teaching the scriptures in many cases, and people are listening to what they want to hear, they don't have the same worldview that the Bible has in it. We're going to be talking about Lucifer. This is the second session on it. We're going to be talking about no sympathy for the devil, Lucifer's fall, part 2, and it's going to be taking out the trash. This is the second half of this. And again, the reason why we do not see that there is a problem with giving you a worldview notice is that the latest study that George Barna's group did, taking a look at the beliefs of people who say they're born again, had some rather shocking information in it. Number one, it said that born again adults who say they have a biblical worldview, 54% of them do not believe in the existence of absolute moral truth. That's a problem because the Bible is absolute moral truth. It should be 100%, not 54% for people who say they're born again. Here's the next one, point number 2, which is a bit of a problem. Those who say they're born again, who have a faith in Jesus Christ, who have placed all of their faith in Him, 60% of them say there's no such thing as Satan. They don't believe in the existence of Satan. That's a problem. And then point 3 is, of those who say they're born again, there are still 53% who think there's a component that they're going to get to heaven because of their behavior. It has nothing to do with it. Getting to heaven has nothing to do with your behavior. It has to do with everything that Jesus Christ did on the cross, period. There is nothing else to it. So that's why I'm saying this is hazardous to your world view. It just definitely is. We're in Isaiah 14. The format of the chapter is similar to what we saw in Ezekiel chapter 28. They both are about an earthly king, and that's how they start. But this earthly king is motivated and controlled by someone else. And in both cases, the message morphs to talk more about that someone else rather than what the case has been about. As we saw from the last time that we met together, Ezekiel 28, which is where Lucifer's fall also shows up, is more about the creation of his office and the fall of this cherub named Lucifer. But when you get done reading chapter 28, you're kind of like, well, okay, but what was his sin? Well, that's here in Isaiah 14. It's more about the sin that led to the fall. But both sections of Scripture are tied to Genesis chapter 3, where we see Adam and Eve fall. And again, that's not what it's all about either, but that's they're all tied together. All three events are tied together. So number one, you have to remember this. Satan was created by God. He serves in the throne room. Okay? He sees God all the time. He reflects God's glory. He was created perfect in wisdom, perfect in beauty. He is it. And the problem is he began to think that his beauty, which was reflecting God, was actually him. And, even though he saw God every day, even though he worked with God, he still fell. He still rebelled. Dr. Pentecost pieces some of this together for us. Scripture records the fact, according to Dr. Pentecost, that the wisest, most beautiful of God's created beings looked away from the Creator to himself. He failed to recognize that he was, and all he was, and all he had come to be, was a gift from God. We all fail the same way because we realize God created us, but we don't act that way a lot because we're still dealing with the fact that we've got a fallen nature. In turning away from God, Lucifer turned himself to becoming essentially a selfish being. And every man and woman born on this planet since the fall is also a selfish being. We reflect our father, the devil, in that reflection. And I'm picking that term up from how Jesus referred to it when he was talking to the Pharisees. The sin nature is one that reflects Satan. It reflects Lucifer. That which characterizes sinful man is selfishness and self-centeredness. Man is characterized by pride. He lives his life in independence of God, and he's perpetuating the nature of his father, the devil. That's the person who is not saved. Basic selfishness, pride, and independence all characterize Satan when he left his original state, and it characterizes fallen man as well. The heart of the unregenerate person, the person who does not know Jesus Christ, and the actions of that person reflects to one degree or another the nature of their father, the devil. Jesus nailed it talking about the Pharisees when he was explaining to them an item, and all of a sudden they say, "Oh no, this what you're doing is of Satan." They attribute it to Beelzebul, and he kind of makes it very clear for them. He nails it. We come from a corrupted worldview just like they did. And everything that we thought was normal about the corrupted worldview changed when we met Jesus Christ. Now, the Pharisees that Jesus was talking to was in chapter 8 of the book of John, verses 42 to 44. Jesus replied, if God were your father, you'd love me, for I've come from God and am now here. I have not come on my own initiative, but he sent me. Why don't you understand what I'm saying? Well, then he starts laying it out. It is because you cannot accept my teaching. You people are of your father, the devil, and you want to do what your father desires. So he's pointing out very clearly, they do not have the Lord, they are following the others. You're either following the Lord or you're following the devil. They're following the devil, pure and simple. There's no he was a murderer from the beginning. He's talking about Lucifer. He was a murderer from the beginning. He does not uphold the truth because there's no truth in him. Whenever he lies, he speaks according to his own nature because he's a liar and the father of lies. You know, the joke is that how do you know when a politician lies? Well, their lips move. How do you know that a person lies? Somebody who does not know the Lord. You don't, because lying is part of being in this world without Jesus Christ. We're all liars because we follow Satan. He's a liar. We have this violent nature inside of us that sometimes we have to deal with because the Lord is dealing with us with the anger that we have inside. Where does that come from? It comes from Lucifer. He's a murderer from the beginning. He is the number one serial killer in the universe, and he's a liar. And we need to understand that. Everything he does is counterfeit and lie. Being a Christian, a faithful follower of Jesus Christ, we are countercultural. We do not reflect that. We have turned away from that, and we should have a different worldview because of that, and that's part of the problem. Being a believer today, and this is not new, this is the way it's been for a long, long, long time, about 2,000 years. Being a believer is an extremist view that many people now hold. They say that you're an extremist if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you actually take the Bible seriously. Many historic Christian beliefs and practices, again, this is coming from Barna Group, are considered to be extreme by large portions of Americans, especially non-Christians. 2 out of 5 adults believe it's extremist to try and convert others to their faith. 60% of all adults in America and 83% of atheists and agnostics believe evangelism, one of the chief actions that we're supposed to be about as believers in Jesus Christ, is an extremist action. And that comes from David Kinnaman in his book, Good Faith, Being a Christian When Society Thinks You're Irrelevant and Extreme. Well, we're there. You look at what's going on around us today, and you look at some of the comments that have been in the news over the past several weeks, especially saying burn it all down, and they're talking about churches, they're talking about Christian believers, and you all of a sudden realize this is not the America that we thought we were growing up in. Things are changing, and it's because we are in the end of the age, just as Jesus talked about back in Matthew chapter 24 and 25. What we do here at Calvary is we study the whole counsel of God. We go through the scriptures chapter by chapter, verse by verse. The Bible is the truth from the creator of the universe. That is unchanging truth. What that means is he hasn't changed his mind. What's in the Bible is true. It's reflected. It's not exhaustive truth, but what is there is true. God has not changed his mind. He hasn't changed his mind about any of it, no matter how we try to twist his words. But Lucifer, he lies all the time. All the time. He does it continuously. He is the originator of spin. He is the truth twister. And by the way, we were all good at that before coming to Christ. All of us were. We've already covered 3 I will statements that Lucifer made as part of his rebellion. We'll kind of review them real quickly. In his message, by the way, Isaiah is telling us that there are 5 specific I will statements that Lucifer makes here in this section of Scripture. And these are manifestations of his rebellion. It's what he still wants to do today. So verse 13 of chapter 14 says, "But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north." Now, we talked about that, but in summary, what Lucifer is saying is he wanted to take over heaven as his own. He wanted to rule over all the heavenly host. He wanted the third heaven to belong to him, to be his digs, to be where he belonged. And he wanted to rule over the heavenly host. Now, he had been the throne guardian, remember? He saw all of them coming and reporting to the Lord. He saw all of them, the divine council meeting. He saw all of that, and he wanted it for himself. And he wanted to rule over everything. He wanted to do so from his substitute for Mount Zion. And we talked about that as well, Mount Zaphon, which is actually a mountain that exists on the border between Syria and Turkey, towards the coast. He wanted to be in control of the universe, literally usurping God's authority. That's what he wanted. And that's what he still wants, and that's what he's still working towards. Now recall that when we see him make a final move against heaven in Revelation chapter 12, as part of his rebellion, who is it that throws him out of heaven? Well, it's not God. It's Michael, the archangel. He's the one that casts him out. A former colleague who is still supernaturally empowered with the power of the Holy Spirit casts him out. Lucifer and his followers are not empowered anymore. They're just basically fallen divine beings trying to do the best they can, like people here on earth who are human beings who don't have the Holy Spirit, who are not saved. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 to 12, gives us the details. "And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, he who accuses them before our God day and night. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. They did not love their life even when they faced death. For this reason rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell on them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you having great wrath, knowing he has only a short time. When he is cast out of heaven, at that point, he is cast out of the third heaven, which is where God and his throne is. We saw the throne room in Revelation chapter 4. He is cast out of the second heaven, which is all of the interstellar space, and again, we're looking at the cosmology of the Jews. And the first heaven is where he's cast down to, and that's planet Earth and the immediate or surrounding of planet Earth, and that's it. His being cast out of heaven is the result not of a contest a battle with the Lord, which there is a war going on, but this is just one incident that leads to a new phase, and it's his former colleagues who cast him out, led by the archangel Michael. Satan and his army cannot defeat Michael and those faithful heavenly host who are still following the Lord. There's no need for intervention by God. Michael and his army are sufficient for the task before them. So we'll take a look at verse 14. Lucifer continues his I will pride statements, and these are still operative, even though this future that we just discussed out of Revelation 12 is definitely the future for Lucifer. Verse 14, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. In the scriptures, when we see the term the clouds, we're either talking about the weather, or many times it refers to a dwelling place of God. And here that what we're seeing is that Lucifer wanted to exalt himself above God, as well as all the other angelic beings. He wanted to bring God under subjection to himself. He's desiring to be the cloud rider. He wants to be the one who rides the clouds. To a thinking of a Jew, when this is being written, they're familiar with a guy by the name of Baal. He's a false god that the Jews had a problem with. Baal had his Mount of Assembly on Mount Zaphon. So immediately you start seeing, well, Baal and Lucifer, they're both using the same mountain. Yeah, they are. It's probably Lucifer disguised. But he also needed a press agent. So Lucifer found one of the civilizations around Mount Zaphon to be his press agent. But thinking as a Jew, when you see the term the cloud rider, you start thinking about, well, what does it say about the second power of heaven in Daniel 7? Now, we know that person is Jesus Christ, and Daniel 7, verses 13 and 14 is another view of the same thing that we see in the book of Revelation, chapter 3 and chapter 4. But verse 13 of Daniel 7 says this, I was watching in the night visions, and with the clouds of the sky, one like a son of man was approaching. He went up to the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. Now, did you catch the fact? And with the clouds of the sky, one like the Son of Man was approaching. Okay, that's the approach of Jesus Christ with the clouds of the sky. He's the cloud rider. He went up to the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. To him was given ruling authority, honor, and sovereignty. All peoples, nations, language groups were serving him. His authority is eternal and will not pass away. His kingdom will not be destroyed. We've already seen that Lucifer wants to be seated on the Mount of Assembly. We know that. We know also that he wants to counterfeit, because he is a counterfeiter. And so he wants to counterfeit and be on Mount Zaphon rather than Mount Zion. It's a better mountain, he thinks. Now, again, Baal had his headquarters on Mount Zaphon. And in the literature of the community that grew up just below that, Ugarit, one of the ancient civilizations there, Baal is referred to as the one who rides the clouds. He's counterfeiting who God really is. To ancient people all over the Mediterranean, Israelite or not, according to Dr. Heiser, one who rides the clouds was a deity. They considered him to be a god. His status as a god was unquestioned because he said he was a cloud rider. So any figure that rode the clouds was a god, according to what they would believe in that general area. Again, remember, Lucifer is a counterfeiter. Yahweh points out this counterfeit multiple times in the scriptures, where he goes out of his way to show, no, I'm really the cloud rider, you're not. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 26, there is no one like God, O Jeshurun, who rides through the sky to help you on the clouds of majesty. Okay. Psalm 104, verses 1 to 4. Praise the Lord, O my soul, O Lord my God, you are magnificent. You're robed in splendor and majesty. He covers himself with light as if it were a garment. He stretches out the skies like a tent curtain and lays the beams of the upper rooms of his palace on the rain clouds. He makes the clouds his chariot. This is God, not a counterfeiter. And he travels along on the wings of the wind. He makes the winds his messengers and flaming fire his attendant. We already saw the section from Daniel where the second power in heaven, Jesus Christ, arrives on the clouds. Jesus used this same term when he was talking with the Pharisees. Now, he's already been arrested. He's on his way to the cross. And the Pharisees will clearly understand what it is he's saying about himself when he uses this term. It's in Matthew 26, verses 63 to 66. Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you're the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man, and he goes right to Daniel, seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, what was the understanding of the high priest? Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he's uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You've now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment? And they answered, he deserves death. Why? He just said he was God. He was the cloud rider, because he is God. He is the cloud rider. But for those who embraced the counterfeit and worshiped Baal, they saw the cloud rider as something different. In Ugarit, because again, you have to remember, Satan needed a press agent, so he's using the people of Ugarit and their mythology to be his press agent. They used the phrase rider in the clouds 15 times within all of the different texts that they actually generated from that civilization. When it shows up, it refers to Baal's role as the bringer of rain, or it invokes him as the one who ends drought because of the rider of the clouds. Or sometimes it shows up where he's the storm god and he's the warrior riding on the clouds. And this is all part of Satan's grand counterfeit. The biblical writers actually used this phrase, the one who rides the clouds, specifically to make a point that it's not Baal who rides the clouds. It's Yahweh who rides the clouds. And think about what that means. It means that if you command the clouds, you command rain. You're the one who gives fertility to the land, not Baal. Dr. Heiser goes on to say, their point is that Baal's not the one responsible for our survival here. For our food, for our sustenance, it's all Yahweh. It's the God of Israel who's doing this. Riding the clouds is sort of a military thing because it's a chariot figure, and you're commanding the heavens, but it's not Baal who commands the heavens. It's Yahweh who commands the heavens. So what we're seeing again is very simple. Since Lucifer is incapable of personally producing anything that he desires, because he's a created being, he's not God. And by the way, his rebellion, it kind of kicked him out of where his office had been. He no longer can go there. In fact, he has difficulty even getting access to the third heaven right now, and he's going to be kicked out. We know he's accusing us, but that's going to end someday soon too. He relies on spreading lies, and he appropriates terms for himself that reflect his views of himself rather than what it is that the truth is about him. It's all self-promotion. It's all press releases that he actually believes. And these are all ideas that Yahweh is more than happy to cut down over and over and over again in the scriptures. So again, looking at verse 14, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. He's not the cloud rider. The final I will statement he makes, I will make myself like the Most High, makes it crystal clear what his intent is. He wants to be like God. We see people today all around us. All of us have been made in the image of God. Those who are believers, those who aren't believers, we're all made in his image. And before Jesus, we're all doing the exact same thing that Lucifer desired to do. We want to be on the throne. We want to make ourselves to be God. So, we like being on the throne. We like being in control. I mean, this hooked Eve back in chapter 3 of Genesis. It hooked Adam as well. I mean, that's the hook. That's what we all are trying to be. And then we give our life to Jesus Christ, and it changes everything. But remember, before you gave a life to Jesus, I was one of them, I was fearful that if I gave my life to Jesus, he's going to want to make me do something I don't want to do, like be a missionary to Africa. And that's not what he wanted me to do. I had a lot of friends who became missionaries to Africa. I had a track coach who was born in Africa because that's where his parents were missionaries. And I have a lot of friends who were saved as a result of missionaries in Africa because that's where they're from. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 to 10. This shows you the pride, the hubris of this created being, the one who wants to be God, and how willing he is to tell his own creator, Jesus Christ, who we know created everything. Jesus is the one who created Lucifer. So here we are. Jesus is now in the wilderness, and he's being tempted by the devil, Lucifer. And here's what it says, starting in verse 8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their grandeur. And he said to him, I'll give you all these things if you throw yourself to the ground and worship me. Imagine that. The creator of everything, the creator of the universe, the creator of the one who's saying, fall down and worship me. Really? Really? You're saying this, Lucifer? Then Jesus said to him, go away, Satan, for it's written, you are to worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Now, he didn't question the fact that at that point in time, it belonged to Lucifer. He stole it fair and square from Adam and Eve. But the pride, he was wanting to be like God, and he actually is telling God, fall down and worship me. And God said, no. You're not in that place. Dr. Lewis Sperry Schaefer, who's one of the founders of Biola, as well as he's one of the founders of Dallas Theological Seminary, writes in his book, Satan, the master passion of Satan leads him not only to strive for the success of all of his own projects, but he also to wage an unceasing war against Yahweh. These two lines of activity are inseparable. He cannot establish and develop his own kingdom and at the same time permit subjects of his kingdom to be translated out into another kingdom, especially when they remain in the midst of his kingdom as a living power and testimony against him. So in other words, stop and think about it. Satan owns everything right now. He's the prince of the power of the air. He's the God of this world. That was what Jesus said, even though Christ defeated him on the cross. He thinks he owns all of this. And when we give our life to Jesus Christ, we are changing sides. We're leaving the side of Lucifer and we're turning to Jesus Christ. We're moving to the side of God. And we're still here. In fact, we're all about stealing others away from that evil kingdom. That's what Jesus was all about when he was in Caesarea Philippi, just prior to the Mount of Transfiguration, where he points at what was known as the gates of hell, the altar of Pan, and says, we're going to be taking people from that, and they're going to be becoming believers. And that's what's going on. It's a warfare. It's a spiritual warfare. Every time someone is baptized, they are announcing to the fallen divine beings, you lost another one. Here's another one who's now pledging loyalty to Jesus Christ. So getting back to Lucifer, can he reasonably allow the accomplishments of any of the projects of God to go unchallenged? No, of course not. That's why we have this unceasing warfare that's going on. The present time is to Satan a struggle for his own existence. Plus, there's a realization of everything he's tried to do in the past. We have to remember this. The warfare is not a passing amusement for him. He has to win. He has rebelled against the God of the universe. And all he is facing is a terrible, awful judgment if he cannot succeed. And he believes he can, which is why he's still fighting. The spectacle now presented to all enlightened beings throughout the universe is of this mighty celestial being, the God of the earth, who, by creation, is the full measure of perfection in wisdom and beauty, involved in desperate warfare for his own survival. And his own ambition is to thwart every single movement of Yahweh, the Most High, because there's no ground for him to fail anymore in terms of Lucifer. He has got to succeed in this battle, and he's not going to. He's not going to. On the other side, on God's side, certainty. We already know who's won. Jesus has won. He's already got the victory. The ultimate counterfeit is Lucifer. And we're going to talk a little bit about where he personally works with the beast at the end of the age and counterfeits the Trinity. Let no one deceive you. This is in 2 Thessalonians. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not arrive until the rebellion comes and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. He opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, and as a result takes a seat in God's temple, displaying himself as God. That's talking about the beast, who is going to be personally empowered and indwelt by Lucifer, by Satan. Now, how selfish is Isaiah saying this? Is he telling us something that we don't understand completely? There is an Aramaic translation of the scriptures called the Targum, and it says in verse 14 in that translation, "I will ascend above all the people; I will be higher than them all." Well, that's pretty clear. And then there's a Chaldean paraphrase as well of verse 14, and it says, "I will have ascendancy over all people. I will be higher than all of them." We're picking up on the desire of this entity, this divine fallen being, this former member of the heavenly host. God did not create him as a satanic being. God did not create him as a rebel against God, as the enemy of good, as the enemy of God. We have to remember that. When he was created, and we see it in the Bible, when God finished creation, it was all good, because this hadn't happened yet. When he was created to be in subjection to God. But he was created with a capacity also, like we have, of free choice. He could choose to follow or not to follow. So when God revealed his purpose to Lucifer, he's the throne guardian. He's beautiful. He leads music. He's going to be giving glory to God for eternity. He's going to be reflecting the glory of God. And he rebels against that. He has better ideas. He has a different purpose entirely. So 5 times that we see here in Isaiah, he says, I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. Each time he says that, he's setting his will against the will of God, and he's substituting his own program and purpose against what that was of God's. God's perfect. It was the perfect program for him. But he decided he wanted to do something else. These 5 statements are significant. Dr. Pentecost tells us that these 5 statements reveal to us Satan's program. He has not changed his purpose. He's not changed his program. He's not altered his will. This is his program. This is what he's trying to do, and he's still trying to do it today. Verse 15, though, tells us what the ultimate end of that is. Nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. Here's a contrast that is just absolutely breathtaking. This cherub, this created divine being, created in the image of God, created to reflect the glory of God, created with all this wisdom and all this beauty, is not going to be able to thrust himself up as he desires to be God. Instead, he's going to go to the lowest of the lows, from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. He's going to the bottom of the pit. He's going to the recesses of the pit. There's no place. I mean, it's kind of like taking an elevator to the basement and being handed a shovel and said, dig lower. You got to go lower. That's kind of what's going on with this. This created being who was supposed to reflect God isn't. Instead, he winds up being the originator of rebellion. And if you look at it in medical terms, he's patient zero. He's the one that starts this entire disease called sin. And he has to be removed from the scene and quarantined forever. The forever piece is coming, but it's going to be delayed by 1,000 years. He's going to be held prisoner for 1,000 years. And as he's cast down, we see the greeting he gets. We've already looked a little bit at it back in verses 9 to 11. It says this. And again, remember, this is him coming down. Sheol from beneath is excited over you to meet you when you come. It arises for you the spirits of the dead, all the leaders of the earth. It raises all the kings of the nations from their thrones. They'll all respond and say to you, even you've been made weak as we. You've become like us. Your pomp and the music of your harps have been brought down to Sheol. Maggots are spread out as your bed beneath you, and worms are your covering. What a wonderful image. In Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 3, we see the event as it takes place. John's letting us know as he sees it happening. Then I saw an angel descending from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the abyss and a huge chain. He seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who's the devil and Satan, and tied him up for 1,000 years. The angel then threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it so he could not deceive the nations until the 1,000 years were finished. After these things, he has to be released for a brief period of time. If you want more on that, we covered that in our study in the book of Revelation. Lucifer knows right now, today, exactly what his end is. He knows what the scriptures say. He hasn't put it all together, just as he didn't put all of it together about the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, but he knows when it's going to take place, and he knows pretty much the time period. We're in the last days, and I think he knows that. He knows that he's going to lead an army of fallen ones one more time against the forces of heaven. He thinks he's going to win, but it's not even a close battle. We already know that. But how could he keep fighting? With all this going on, knowing that he was defeated on the cross, knowing that he's defeated, period, why does he keep fighting? Well, have we seen that? Yeah, it's called World War II. During World War II, in both theaters, Germany and Japan, both continued to fight, even after they knew they had lost. Hitler's generals had wanted to sue for peace for some time, ever since they couldn't take Great Britain. But nope, not going to happen. He did not let them. Some of the Japanese high command knew that all was lost. But in both cases, the primary leadership, those who were actually in control, Hitler in one case and in some of the military leadership of Japan in the other, they wanted to continue the fight to the bitter end, even though they had lost. In Germany, it was utter disaster. And in Japan, it only ended when the emperor intervened. If he hadn't, there would have been an invasion of Japan and probably another 1.5 million people killed. The knowledge that one has been vanquished does not necessarily stop someone from fighting. The fact that Satan has been defeated, his judgment pronounced, and his destiny settled, does not keep him from waging warfare against God, against the Son of God, and against the children of God. And this is all detailed for us in the scriptures. We see it. But here's the thing. Stop and think about this. Look at it as a Christian. Look at it as a non-Christian. As a Christian, what frustrates you? Well, evil. Seeing it take place. Right? Dr. Geisler talks about this in one of his systematic theologies. He says, what frustrates good people is evil, and what frustrates evil people is good. Evil people don't like having good around. They don't like it. So the final solution to this problem demands a separation, where there'll be no more evil to frustrate the good people, and no more good to frustrate the evil people. Each will have whatever it is that they wanted. Sin will be defeated in the saved. Those of us who know Jesus Christ, when we receive our new bodies, we will no longer have the capacity to sin. We'll be rescued from the presence of sin, and it'll be absolutely, totally defeated. We'll never have to worry about it again and delivered from its presence. And by the way, sin will also be defeated in the unsaved, too. They'll no longer be able to spread it to others. It's a disease. They can't spread it anymore. The infection of evil will be forever halted by its everlasting quarantine. Therefore, the good will be forever preserved from evil's deadly effects. And stop and think. The place of quarantine, and we've talked about it, and this is another place that people don't believe actually exists, but it does. People who make the decision not to follow Jesus Christ have made the decision that they want to be eternally housed in the quarantine facility known as hell. Jesus announced to his disciples just prior to going to the cross about his victory that he was going to achieve. Our Lord announced to the disciples the certainty of his victory in a prophetic revelation, and he revealed that Satan was already a vanquished foe. In John chapter 12, verses 28 to 33, he says this, "Father, glorify your name." Then a voice comes from heaven, "I've glorified it, I will glorify it again." The crowd that stood there and heard the voice said that it thundered. Others said that an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, "This voice has not come for my benefit, but for yours. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." Now he said this to indicate clearly what kind of death he was going to die. No matter what Satan whispers to us, no matter how hard he tries to convince the world that he's a force to be dealt with, no matter how he tries to explain to all of us that he's in control, the reality is he's defeated. He's already defeated. In John 16, Jesus says this, "I tell you the truth. It's to your advantage that I'm going away. For if I do not go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he'll prove the world wrong concerning sin and righteousness and judgment." Concerning sin, judgment, because they do not believe in me. Concerning righteousness, because I'm going to the Father, and you'll see me no longer. And concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world has been condemned. When Jesus says condemned, he uses what's the Greek word kekritai, okay? It comes from the word krino, which means to separate or distinguish, to discriminate between good and evil, to select or choose out the good. In the New Testament, it means to judge or form or give an opinion after separating and considering the particulars of a case. When Jesus uses the word, he uses it in a grammar form that communicates something else to us. He's communicating it to us in the perfect passive indicative, which is significant because the perfect tense tells us that this is a completed action in the present time. Jesus is saying that he is about to go to the cross and complete the condemnation of Satan. He's going to complete it. He's going to defeat him on the cross. And he's going to do it himself. That's kind of what this is saying. Jesus is telling his disciples that the ruler of this world has been, past tense, judged, but he's also saying it took place on the cross, a completed action for him in the present. Jesus was letting his disciples know that a major enemy was about to be defeated as a result of the cross. Satan is defeated. He's not active, other than he's fighting against the inevitable, ultimate defeat when he's taken and thrown in chains. He's already defeated. For Isaiah, when he was writing this, it was an event still to take place in the future. The cross was still in the future for Isaiah. But it's an event that was certain to take place. And he's telling us what Yahweh says he's going to do with this rebel. He's going to be thrown down to the recesses of the pit, to the lowest level. The deeper one goes into Sheol, the worse is their condition. The punishment of Hallel, as Dr. Heiser says, is to live in the realm of the dead. Hallel ends up in Sheol, the pit brought to the earth by God, the Most High. The one he wants to be the most... No, the Most High is going to deal with him. However victorious he may have been over the first Adam, and how many victory laps he took, it's certain that he has now met his complete and final judgment and sentence in the second Adam, and that the bruising of the serpent's head was realized, which was part of what he was promised in the Adamic covenant. Colossians chapter 2, verses 14 and 15 says this: by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing to the cross. He disarmed, this is Jesus at the cross, he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. This is using the picture of the Roman triumph where the victorious general would march down the main street of Rome with his enemies in chains, triumphing over them and shaming them. Just before final judgment, and for in Rome that was usually execution, would take place. Lucifer and his minions had no idea what was coming. They were filled with hate, and they had one goal, and that was to destroy Jesus. They didn't understand what was going on. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He says, but we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages. None of the rulers of the age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. He's not talking about earthly rulers. He's talking about the powers behind the throne. He's talking about these eternal beings who have rebelled against God. They're not eternal. They've not existed forever. It's just they've got, from this point forward, just like all of us. But they're in a different realm, and they're lost. Lucifer took the bait. Jesus had intentionally gone to one of Satan's primary locations, Mount Hermon. For a Jew, that would be considered demon central. And on Mount Hermon, Jesus presented himself. We see this in Mark 9. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. Jesus intentionally went to what the Jews would consider Satan's turf, and there he messaged to Satan, here I am, what are you going to do about it? He basically called Satan out with his action on Mount Hermon, because as immediately as he starts coming down, he's talking about, I've got to go to the cross. I've got to go to the cross. He actually tells his disciples in Mark 9, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They'll kill him, and when he's killed after 3 days, he will rise. So, I mean, he's trying to prep them for what's coming, because he knows now that he has called out Satan, and Satan's going to take action. Verse 16 of Isaiah 14. Again, we're getting back to the view of those watching this fallen divine being being thrown to the bottom of the pit. Those who see you will gaze at you. They'll ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made earth tremble, who shook kingdoms? I like how Dr. Geisler puts it. While the serpent was biting the heel of the servant, of the Savior, by his crucifixion, okay, the Savior was crushing the head of the serpent by his resurrection. Satan bit on the bait of Christ's humanity and was caught on the hook of his deity. Satan was defeated officially, legally, by the death of Christ. It says that in Romans 3, 4, and 5. He's defeated practically by application in our lives when we resist him by the power of the cross. It says that in Romans 6 and 7. And he will be defeated ultimately when Christ returns and redeems our bodies from death. And that's in Romans chapter 8. But what we see starting here in verse 16 in Isaiah is the reaction again of all those in Sheol who see him. It's like the reaction that the king of Babylon would get, but now we're talking about the ultimate defeat of the enemy of all of us. And as he goes by in chains, here's what they say, starting again in verse 16. Those who see you will gaze at you, they'll ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a wilderness and overthrew its cities, who did not allow his prisoners to go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you've been cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch, clothed with the slain who are pierced with the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a trampled corpse. I think we lose the actual impact of the English translation with the word gaze that we see in verse 16 in the English. I mean, they're staring in incredulity is what they're doing. The word in the Hebrew actually means to gaze at, or to examine critically, or to stare at someone who's been humiliated. Literally, they're staring in awe and considering, and then verbalizing, saying with incredulity, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a wilderness, overthrew its cities, who didn't allow his prisoners to go home? Yeah, this is Lucifer. I mean, can this man have effected such depredation on the work of God? He shook the earth, made the world a desert. That's what we just read the things that take place during the Great Tribulation. The people, he made kingdoms tremble and overthrow cities. Did he really exercise such an inhuman grip on people that he would not let his captives go home? Yeah, he tried to hold them all in captivity in Sheol, and Jesus Christ, through his resurrection, let them all free. All the believers, all the Old Testament believers from paradise. Yet this is what he did. And he fell because of it. Now, recall from our study of the book of Revelation, all the violence, all of the judgment, at least 4 billion dead, maybe more, the destruction, all because of this one that's now passing by them in chains. All of the centuries of death and destruction, which mankind has clearly fallen in lockstep with and participated in. But at the end of the day, Lucifer is the one ultimately behind it, and now they're seeing him walk by in chains. This helps us to truly understand the meaning behind Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. This is the ultimate example of a fall. There's no memorial tomb for any of the kings of Babylon. There's not one for Belshazzar. There's not going to be a memorial tomb for the future king of Babylon. There's not going to be one for this one either. In verse 19, the counterfeit side is referred to. You've been cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch, clothed with the slain, who are pierced with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a trampled corpse. That phrase, the rejected branch, uses a word that we've seen a couple of times already in Isaiah. It's the same word. Earlier in Isaiah, we read about the branch, Messiah. In that day, the branch, that's her, of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth will be the pride and the adornment of the survivors of Israel. We also see that when the remnant return at the end of the age, this branch, Messiah, will rule over the world. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The plan of Lucifer has been to counterfeit what it is that God has done. We talked about that with him saying, I'm the cloud rider. No, he's not. Well, he's going to impersonate the branch. We see he's going to go even as far as trying to replicate the Trinity with his own version of an unholy Trinity. And we see that in Revelation 12 and 13. Satan's the dragon, as shown in Revelation 12. And as we see in Revelation 13:4, the earth dwellers now worship the dragon at the outset of the Great Tribulation. His false Messiah branch, the beast, will have a false resurrection. And he's going to have the dragon's authority at his disposal. And he's an object of worship as a result of his so-called death and resurrection. To complete the unholy Trinity, there's got to be a counterfeit of the Holy Spirit, someone who leads them to the beast and the image of the beast. And that's the subject of Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 to 18. He's known as the false prophet. As we discussed in detail in our Revelation study, this false prophet's the one who enables the worship of the image of the beast and enforces the mark of the beast on the population of the planet, all those earth dwellers who take it. It's obvious he's going to use artificial intelligence, quantum computing, global broadband, and any other natural methods that can be developed to counterfeit the Spirit. And he's going to be also empowered by Lucifer as well. Lucifer wants to be like the Most High. His destination, though, is going to be the Most Low. He's not the branch, nor is his surrogate, whom he possesses, be the branch. He's the false branch. He's not the real branch. Remember, the beast will be perceived by the nation of Israel early in his career, before he shows up in the temple and says, "I'm God, worship me," as a type of Messiah. The Jews have an idea currently that there are actually two Messiahs. This is some of the confusion there for them. They should be looking for, and neither one is the actual Messiah. We'll see Ben Ephraim and Ben David, the names of two Messiahs expected by the modern Jews. To evade the express predictions of the Old Testament prophets concerning the mean condition of the Messiah, they confidently speak of looking forward to the appearance of two Messiahs, again, Ben Ephraim, he's also known as Ben Joseph, whom they grant to be a person of mean and afflicted condition in this world, and the other, Ben David, who will be powerful and victorious. Jesus warned about this. He told them in Matthew 24, verses 4 and 5, "Watch out that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will mislead many." It's interesting to note that nobody came prior to Jesus saying they were Messiah, but it's all after Jesus. And I find it intriguing that in the study of this, Isidore Singer, who is the author of the Jewish Encyclopedia, says this has truly been the case over the centuries. I mean, he actually goes into detail in his encyclopedia of all the different folks who have impersonated Messiah, starting with the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 134 AD. Persons who claim to be the deliverers of Israel, divinely appointed to bring about the establishment of the promised Messianic kingdom. Some of the pseudo-messiahs who have arisen at various epochs were impostors seeking to exploit the credulity of the masses for selfish purposes. Others, victims of their own beliefs or delusions. All of them had as their goal the restoration of Israel to its native land. Some sought to accomplish this through penitence, fasting, prayer, looked forward to miracles to assist them. Others appealed to arms. In connection with their messianic role, some enacted the part of religious reformers, introducing innovations and trying to subvert Judaism. As there existed a belief in two messiahs, an Ephraimic Messiah, one who would be the forerunner of the Davidic Messiah, there appear among the pseudo-messiahs both those who claim to be Messiah of the house of David and those who claim to be of the Messiah of the son of Joseph. The footnote in the Midrash, though, explains that one anointed for battle as the first of the two Messiahs, who would be a descendant from Joseph, the Ephraimic Messiah. According to the ancient Jewish tradition of two Messiahs, known as Messiah ben Joseph, he would be the one who conduct the final war and be the forerunner of the real Messiah, Messiah ben David, also known as Royal Messiah. And this is where the beast is going to step in and be able to cut a 7-year deal with Israel, saying, "I'm going to protect you." And they're going to believe that he will. And they're going to believe that he is more than what he really is. This one anointed for battle, the one who promises to protect Israel, the one who signs that 7-year peace deal, it's the beast. Daniel 9:27 tells us this is what's going to happen. He'll make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he'll put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. Jesus talks about that in Matthew 24, even until a complete destruction. Once decreed and is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Daniel 11, verses 31 to 36, says forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice. They will set up the abomination of desolation. Again, Jesus talked about that. By smooth words, he'll turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many, yet they will fall by sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now, when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it's still time to come. It's still to come at the appointed time. Then the king will do as he pleases, and he'll exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods, and he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. Isaiah tells us the impersonator, possibly a reference to the end-time king of Babylon, could be. It could also be Lucifer, but he actually gives us a picture that they're going to be clothed with the slain. The image is that bodies are going to be thrown on top of this one who led them, or led the rebellion. And when you stop and think that Lucifer is going to be thrown into the pit, you have the image of all the dead, all their spirits being on top of him. And you start seeing, oh yeah, I start to get that now. I start seeing that idea. Verse 20 of Isaiah 14, you will not be united with them in burial because you've ruined your country and you've slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers not be mentioned forever. The judgment contained in this verse is kind of surprising because it's unexpected. Normally you think you're going to be judged for doing stuff to other people, but no, he's oppressing my people. Well, he's oppressing his people, but in the Septuagint we'll find out it's God's people who he's oppressing. And it's his own land, it's his own people he's destroyed. That's what he's being judged for. Now, in the Septuagint it says, neither will you be clean, for you destroyed my land and you killed my people, and you'll certainly not remain in eternity, evil seed. Again, the picture is this is God's people. He is busy trying to destroy the Jews. He's busy trying to destroy all those who have come to Jesus Christ during the tribulation. He's trying to kill all of them. He's trying to destroy basically everything that God has ever put together because he wants to be in charge. The Septuagint gives us a different perspective on the judgment. It's kind of like one as a shepherd who doesn't do what he should, and he's not protecting those who he has charge of. He's actually misusing all of those who he has charge of, whether his own people or those who the Lord has allowed him to rule over, his people. Zechariah wrote about the foolish shepherd, the one who's empowered by Lucifer, in Zechariah chapter 11, verses 15 to 17. The Lord said to me, take once more the equipment of a foolish shepherd, for behold, I'm raising up in the land a shepherd who does not care for those being destroyed, or seek the young, or heal the maimed, or nourish the healthy, but devours the flesh of the fat ones, tearing off even their hooves. Woe to my worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm and his right eye, and let his arm be wholly withered, and his right eye utterly blinded. There at the end, we get a physical picture of what the beast will look like as a result of the purported death and resurrection. He is going to have a withered arm, and he's going to have a lack of eyesight in his right eye. And we talked about that in our study in the book of Revelation. The end goal for this one who has ruined his country, or the Lord's country, and the Lord's people and his people, no one will ever mention him again, or his offspring. In other words, his followers, those who followed and served him. On that day there shall be a fountain opened for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and uncleanliness. And on that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the land so that they shall be remembered no more. Remember, he also impersonated an idol with Baal. I will remove from the land the prophets and the spirits of uncleanliness. That's in Zechariah 13, verses 1 and 2. Revelation chapter 21, verses 3 and 4 also tells us there's not going to be a remembrance of these guys. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men. He will dwell among them, and they shall be his people. And God himself will be among them. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. There's a realization that we're in the eternal state. Psalm 37:28 says, "The Lord loves justice. He will not forsake his saints. They are preserved forever. But the children of the wicked shall be cut off." They're not going to be remembered. Not at all. Verses 21 to 23, in conclusion, we're looking here in Isaiah 14. "Prepare for his sons a place of slaughter, because of the iniquity of their fathers. They must not arise and take possession of the earth, and fill the face of the world with cities. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and will cut off from Babylon name and survivors, offspring and posterity, declares the Lord. I will also make a possession for the hedgehog in swamps of water, and I'll sweep it with the broom of destruction." He's going to take out the trash, declares the Lord of hosts. The king of Babylon, the one coming soon for Isaiah, that was indeed the case. The line of Nabonidus and Belshazzar was cut off. For the future king of Babylon, the beast was seized, and along with him the false prophet who had performed the signs on his behalf, signs by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. Both of them were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. The others were killed by the sword that extended from the mouth of the one who rode the horse, and all the birds gorged themselves with their flesh. They're not going to be remembered either. Their line has ended. After the return of the true branch, the Messiah, his rule eliminates all the goats. Remember, that was a term that was used for the rulers of the earth, male goats. But the sheep are the ones who will enter the kingdom. The goats won't be there anymore. They're gone. They won't be continued. No longer will we see evil people rising and taking over government or establishing cities that are ruled contrary to the rule of Messiah. We learn in Revelation 19:15 that Messiah, from his mouth, extends a sharp sword so he can strike the nations, and he will rule them with an iron rod, and he stomps the winepress of the furious wrath of God, the all-powerful. As for Babylon, we see the future for it as we saw in Isaiah 13:21. And here we see Yahweh depicted as a wife or child cleaning the house by sweeping it. He's removing the trash. I find that interesting because he's taking out the trash. He's getting rid of all of that is going to be in the way of his people and of his kingdom. It's a unique example. It's only Isaiah is the only one that talks about this, taking out the trash. And that ends the oracle of Yahweh, or of Babylon rather, with Yahweh taking out the trash. He's done with them. He has swept the planet clean by sweeping all of the evil away from it. And that's the end of that oracle. Next time we'll talk about the continuation of the oracles. We've still got a few more to go in this section, and we'll start covering that when we get together again next time. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for how much you love us and how much you are going to take care of us to the point that you're going to eliminate evil and sweep it off the planet in preparation for your people who you will have saved from the tribulation, as well as all of us who have given our lives to you and have followed you faithfully. But Lord, it also tells us that there are still many more who need to be saved, many more who need to be introduced to you, because we see this and we know that if they don't give their life to you, Lord, they're going to be part of that group that's going to be swept clean. And Lord, we don't want to see that happen to anyone. Give us wisdom, Lord. Help us to be about the business of making disciples and telling others, even though it's cross-cultural, even though it's extreme, help us to be about the business of telling others about you. Thank you for this time in your word, Lord, and help us to be faithful followers of you in all that we do. We just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. We'll see you all next time. Thanks.